Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to Simplilearn. We are honored to have you join us today for Transformation to Agile, Requirements for Business with your host, Jeff Allen. My name is Richard, and after this intro, I'll be mostly in the background helping Jeff so that everything goes smoothly, and then I'll come back in for the last 15-minute question and answer period. Agile. In today's world in project management in businesses, this is one of the biggest buzzwords out there. Agile, both for having a successful business and for having a successful career. If you do not know Jeff Allen, Jeff has over 19 years experience in the industry as a consultant in Agile, Waterfall, and project management. Is the founder of Power Payment, Get Out of Debt system, lead instructor, trainer, and coach for PM for over half a decade, with certifications in everything from project management to Exen, all that is Agile. For those who aren't familiar with this form of webinar, I want to introduce you to your dashboard. If you could locate your dashboard and then locate the question module, you might have to click on the little red arrow if it auto-collapsed. Go ahead in that question module, type in hello or hi. It lets us know that you're here, you can hear me okay, and that you're excited. Let Jeff know you're excited to be here. We have, I'm not sure what the name is on there, but we have, I want to say Haddad, Ramesh, Ash, thank you for being here. Great to have you. Even a specific hello to Richard, appreciate that one. Go ahead and let this question module be your best friend while we're here. Great place to, we're going through the presentation. You have special questions specific to your career path, to the business or company you're in. Go ahead and ask those questions. At the end, we'll take 15 minutes to try to get through as many of those questions as we can. We do have an expert in here with the 19 years experience, so it's a great time. Use that. We have this resource. Go ahead and use it, and we'll see what we can get to and how many questions we can answer. If you hear something awesome, brilliant, interesting, insightful, and you want to share it in your social channels, whatever your social channels are, if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Tweet, you can use the hashtag SLWebinars. That way people can find it and you'll make them wish they were here. You didn't come here to listen to me. I am proud to introduce Jeff Allen, who will be your host for supporting innovation with Agile, or actually it's Agile Business. Go ahead and sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, tea, or if it's evening where you are at, maybe a glass of wine, and enjoy. It's an honor for me to hand this over to Jeff. Thank you and happy learning. Hello, Jeff, and welcome to Simplilearn today.
Hi, Richard. Glad to be here.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and give you full control.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Glad that you're here. I love Agile, and I'm fresh off of doing an Agile training for WebMD for Simplilearn a couple of weeks ago, and I was reminded about a couple of things on Agile. One is just how brilliant and effective it is, and also just how challenging it can be to actually complete a transformation to Agile. I'm busy on some of my own projects, and I've even converted part of my basement into a team room. Some of you might be familiar with that. And so, not only am I fresh off of spending some time out at WebMD, but I've got a couple projects on my own that I'm involved in right now. And so if you have any questions that come up while we're going through this, go ahead and chat them in the question box, and we'll do our best to cover, any real life questions that you might have when we wrap things up here. So let's go ahead and get started with some materials I've prepared. First of all, we are going to just kind of baseline our understanding on what project management is, and then we'll talk about why an organization would even consider adopting Agile. And I'm not sure, of course, what your perspective is. You may be one of the executives of a business that's considering to making the change to Agile, or maybe you are one of the key people in an organization that's running an adoption effort. But whatever it is, we're going to just make sure that we're really clear why the time and cost investment is worthwhile. Then we'll talk a little bit about making a roadmap for a transition and some of the complaints you can expect and how to overcome some of the resistance that can crop up when we're involved in one of these transformation journeys. So when it comes to project management, I always just figure project management is the science of getting stuff done. And everybody needs to get stuff done, whether we're at work or whether we're at home or whatever it is. And so we're always involved in some kind of effort to manage what we're doing and get stuff done. Now, if we think about some more formal projects, we can go way back in time. We can think about the pyramids in Egypt, the Roman aqueducts, cathedrals in Europe, the first transcontinental railway in America. All of these are examples of projects. And, you know, historically, projects were managed basically informally. And it wasn't until we get into the middle of the 20th century that project management begins to emerge as a profession. Before that, there were some tools that were being used, you know, mostly ad hoc things. Something that is still around that precedes the 1950s are Gantt charts. And there were other informal techniques and tools, but when we get to about 1950, that's when modern project management really begins. And when it comes to just defining what a project is, it's a temporary endeavor that results in something unique. So project management is about doing things that are not part of the routine day-to-day operations. And so organizations will undertake projects to advance their strategic direction. And it could be internal projects in an organization, everything from changing culture to handling customer orders in a more efficient way. Companies undertake projects for customers in order to make money. That, you know, creating something and selling it is a project. Now, when it comes to software development, constructing a building, expanding sales into a new market, and conducting research efforts, these are all examples of projects that are underway all across the world right now, and you're probably involved in something that's kind of fits into one of those broad categories. But not all projects are managed the same. And there have been two basic approaches to project management that have emerged. One, which is the more traditional one, is called Waterfall, and one that is newer, that is it has its roots in software development, is Agile. And at a high level, Waterfall is a plan-driven approach that favors identifying projects that have clear requirements and then creating a master plan on the front end, and then once executing begins, measuring the actual results against the plan in order to determine the health of the project. The Agile approach is different. It is for projects that are unclear. The requirements maybe are not or cannot be defined well up front, or it's expected that they will be changing frequently. And so the focus then is not on creating a master plan and then managing your budget and your schedule against the plans, but it's delivering value to the customer in frequent, short iterations. So two broad approaches to project management. And by the way, team, as I'm out there in the world, and it's likely you might have observed this as well, the demarcation between Waterfall and Agile is becoming a little bit more blurred. And I think that, you know, if you're a practitioner, you're going to want to consider learning Waterfall and Agile at some point. Now, if you're a company that's considering adopting Agile, you are going to be facing some issues. And it's not an easy transformation. It's one of these things where there's kind of a big upfront effort that's required, but once you get through that, then the benefits just start rolling in. And Agile was originally created because there was a need for an alternative to the documentation driven heavyweight software development processes that are done with the waterfall approach. So specifically the issues that were challenging software development projects that used the waterfall approach was there was just too much documentation. And it was very expensive in terms of time and money to react to change. And those of us that have been involved in software development projects know that when you're developing software, there's change all the time. And then poor quality, and I'm sure some of us remember, going back to the early days of software in the computer industry, software was pretty lame, and the documentation on how to use it was not very good. And so, what was coming out of projects was not serving the end user very well. And so Agile emerged, and there's a number of methods that belong to the family of Agile, but if we were to kind of summarize the two approaches, it would look something like this. When it comes to planning, on the waterfall side, the emphasis is on upfront planning and identifying detailed requirements upfront before starting design and development. On Agile, the emphasis is on ongoing planning. And so only high-level product backlog information is created up front, and planning is deferred as long as responsibly possible. The idea being that we make the best decisions when we have the greatest amount of information, so you defer planning decisions as long as you can do so responsibly. When it comes to communication, and this would be among team members as well as with other stakeholders, in Waterfall it's formal and it's structured. In Agile, it's very people-oriented and it's informal, but it's constant. When it comes to the rituals or the ceremonies that are used to actually do a project, in Waterfall there's a high degree of that. There's formal team meetings, there's project reviews, there's a lot of documentation that statuses, where the project is, what's been done, what's forecasted for the next bit of time. In Agile, it's much lower than that. Very little project ceremony. There is ceremony, and it's important in Agile, but it's limited team meetings, brief project reviews, documented status reports with low details, usually informal. When it comes to measuring progress in Waterfall, it's milestone driven, and we're creating artifacts to share what has been accomplished. In Agile, it's different. It's delivering working software to the customer. And then when it comes to change control in Waterfall, you can change things, obviously, but it's a formal process. And usually there's some kind of a formal change control board that reviews proposed changes and either formally rejects or approves them. Scope control becomes very essential in order to make sure that the project stays on budget and on schedule. In Agile, it's not like that. It's limited or no formal change control. And then the scope is actually expected to change. And it expands and contracts. It can even change direction, but it's all based on the customer, the end user's needs. Now, if you're one of the executives, and I affectionately refer to them as suits, and I've been on teams and I've been a suit, and so I get both perspectives. Suits like budgets, and suits like schedules. And particularly, larger companies that are publicly traded, they make forecasts that are embraced and shared at the Wall Street level. And if those kinds of projections are missed, it can have a very negative impact on the value of the stock. And so what do the suits want? They want to know when something's going to be done, how much it's going to cost, and everything kind of gets driven from the top down like that. And that creates one of the biggest challenges when it comes to transforming Agile. And no Agile transformation effort is ever going to end up being successful unless the suits are part of it. They need to understand why Agile is going to actually make it better for them when it comes to budgets and schedules and things like that. So one of the things that can help kind of illustrate the value of Agile and why there might want to be, an effort to transform is this little chart here. This is a type of systems thinking here, where if you look at the lighter colored things at the bottom left, you can see they're labeled simple and complicated. So simple, that's meaning when it comes to requirements and technology, everybody is pretty much on the same place. We know how we're going to deliver whatever it is that we're building with the project. And if it's not known up front, it's easy to know, easily knowable. Complicated, is a little bit more than that. Not a simple project, but the requirements and the technology are still knowable. Then in that green area, that's the sweet spot for Agile. And we've labeled that complex, meaning this is where, when it comes to both the technology and the requirements, it's not fully knowable up front. But we are pretty clear on where we want to go, so there's some, level of reasonable predictability about it. When it comes to systems thinking, it's always wise to go to the other end of the spectrum, which we've labeled chaos, and that's where nothing's knowable nor predictable, and therefore it's actually not manageable. So some order would have to be brought to an effort that would be otherwise chaotic before it could be managed. So you can see that, if you were building a building, you would not even dig the ground up to lay the foundation until you knew what that building was going to look like and the requirements, and everything has to be identified up front. It may not be a simple project, it could be a large and complex building, but the requirements are the type of things that get figured out on the front end. But software is not like that. And the trouble with software is if you try and identify all of the requirements up front, how much testing is going to be needed, how many lines of code are going to be required, you just don't know. And the other thing is that it's very challenging to describe what the end result of software development is going to look like. It's not like a building where you can, mock up a model. You can do some of that, and we do some of that in Agile, but usually when we get into some of the modeling and the wireframing and things like that, that's when the customer might start saying, well, that's not really exactly what I want, and so a more agile approach becomes more effective. So Agile, which really got its start in the late 1990s, has been the subject of a number of different studies, and one that I like to bring to the attention of folks who might be trying to decide whether or not it's worthwhile to consider adopting Agile is a study that was done by the Standish Group a few years ago, and the result of this study was that Agile succeeds 3 times more often than Waterfall. I mean, wrap your mind around that. 300% greater success rate than Waterfall. It's not that Waterfall is not valuable, it is. But if you try and use the Waterfall approach for a software development approach, it's not going to be as successful. So a quote from the report here, that second bullet, It says the agile process is the universal remedy for software development project failure. Software applications developed through the agile process have 3 times the success rate of the traditional waterfall method and a much lower percentage of time and cost overruns. Now, lest you think that this is, off the wall and not grounded in reality, the Standish Group defined project success as projects that were delivered on time, on budget, and on scope. And here we've got a graphic at the bottom that actually shows the results of their study. And you can see on the left versus on the right the difference in success. And you can see that even when it comes down to projects that are challenged, it goes down. So, if I were a suit and we were continually being challenged by budget overruns and delivering things late, I would at some point in time have to say, the way we're doing things is not working. And that's a great project management question, right? Because in project management, we always test and we always measure. And if something's working well, we do it again. If it's not working well, we do something different. So, as a suit, I would have to say, you know what? We need to figure out if there is a better approach to running our projects because a 14% success rate, that's just not going to work. And you get that, right? So, when you run a transformation to Agile, one of the things that you've got to do is create a roadmap. It is a journey, it's not an event. The suits or the PMO or whatever it is can't just say, okay, starting Monday, we're going to do everything using Agile and we're not going to be doing Waterfall anymore. It's not going to fly. So there's an acronym that we use, those of us that are involved in assisting organizations in a journey, and it's called ADAPT. Here, the focus is on Scrum. Scrum is the most popular Agile method. There are many, and all of them agree on core concepts, basic things. But, they all have some styles, some emphasis on different things. And Scrum is the single most popular method in the family of Agile. The second most popular one is XP, and between the two, 80% of all Agile projects either use Scrum or XP, and Scrum is by far the largest of those two. So, adapt. The first one is awareness that the current process is not working. If what you're doing now is working, as project managers, what would we say? There's no need to change. If we're a suit, we would say there is no need to change. And that is foundational to the question of whether or not you would undertake a journey to do Agile. So if things are not working, you have to have that awareness. Then the second is the identification of what you're going to do differently. So there has to be a desire to actually transition to Agile in order to address those things that are contributing to the process not working. Then the second A is ability to succeed with Scrum. So that looks like training. That looks like education. I have done a lot of trainings, and many organizations are so disparate in the lexicon that they use that sometimes the one most important thing that training does is it gets everybody using the same vocabulary so that they're at least talking the same language. When one person says iteration, the other person knows, oh, okay, I get what an iteration is. If a team is talking about its velocity, the suit says, can say, oh, okay, I get what velocity is. And then, of course, there are different types of rituals and approaches that need to be learned and embraced and practiced. The next step would be to promote Scrum in order to share the successes that are occurring during the course of the adoption effort. Sometimes an organization might start with just a single project, a pilot project. They might do it differently than that, but as the successes come rolling in, those things need to be promoted around the organization so that people begin to see, okay, although this is kind of disruptive and things change, we got some wins coming in here, so this is worth it. And then once that begins to happen and begins to kind of permeate the whole organization, then you actually finish the transfer and the transition, and you move everybody in the organization into Scrum or whatever Agile method it is that you're going to be adopting. So, of course, this is high level, and you'd probably want to have a more detailed roadmap than just this, but this is a good place to start. One of the questions that an organization would ask once they've determined to transition to Agile would be, are we going to start small or are we going to do all in? And there are advantages and disadvantages to each. If you look over on the left where it says start small, there's less risk, right? You pick a project or a couple projects. It allows you to kind of cherry pick the team members that you want to have on your first Agile or Scrum team. And by doing that, early success is almost assured. And you also delay the burden and the challenge of radical change. Because when you go from Waterfall to Agile, it's a big change. But you could also do all in. If you do all in, it's going to be a lot faster. It's going to cost less money. There's going to be a whole lot of people that are working on it instead of just a very few. And so there can be some cross-learning. If you're doing all in, it says right here, top-down buy-in helps. I think that's kind of a weak statement, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. You have to have top-down buy-in. Because there's kind of a gap that gets created between the normal forecasts for budgets and schedules that is necessary when you do that transition. And so the suits are going to feel a little bit disconnected and uneasy. So they've got to be involved. The patterns that are used to do it, this is another area where we would consider a number of things. For example, once we start, are we going to make everything transparent to everybody? Or are we going to run a project or a couple projects sort of in stealth mode so that we can control what we're disclosing and when we're disclosing it? And there are, of course, advantages and disadvantages to both. And, the culture of the organization is a big driver in what patterns you use. To the right of that, what about, your technical practices? Are you going to adopt a lot of them all up front, just go for it? Or are you going to roll it out in stages? As you go through the transformation down at the bottom, are you going to split and seed, or are you going to grow and split? So the split and seed is where you use members from an existing team to seed other teams to help them in the transition. Or are you going to grow and split? So you grow an Agile team and you split it, and then you add team members to those smaller teams, and you grow and split, and you grow and split. That probably... at least in my experience, is more effective, particularly because a lot of waterfall organizations have siloed teams, right? You have quality teams, you have business analyst or product manager teams, and then you have, engineers that just do one kind of a thing. And in Agile, each team is cross-functional. So grow and split seems to be the best that I've seen. Um, but, again, it depends on the culture. If I was a suit and I was being persuaded that um, we should probably do this journey and transition to Agile, I would want to make sure that we did a pilot project. Instead of deciding, on the front end, all in, I want to see a project. And so I would rely on the project folks to pick the right project. And this chart right here can be helpful in looking at a number of considerations to identify the right kind of project. So if you look at the upside down triangle, that's project size. So you want to pick a moderately sized project. If it's too large, it might be too complex. The visibility might be too high. If it's too small, it might seem insignificant. If you look at the business sponsorship one, if I'm kind of the suit that's advocating this, and I've got some other suits, colleagues that are, not so sure, I'm going to want to, say, okay, I'm in. And if you're on the project side, you're going to want to have somebody like me that, is sponsoring that project. And, and I might not be 100% on board as a suit, but, I'm willing to authorize it, and I want it to be successful. I'm not looking for failure, I'm looking for success. When it comes to duration, you want it to be, a moderately length of the project. If it's too long or too short, you're going to get critics on both sides that are going to make it harder for the transition. And then, of course, when it comes to importance, if you pick something that's unimportant, nobody cares what the results are. Or if it's critical and it's one of your first projects, all eyes are on it, and when the criticality level is too high, it can create an environment where, little things that don't work out early in an Agile project end up coloring folks' opinions going forward. So if you're going to do a pilot project, you got to select the right one. Get a sponsor from the suit side of things, and make sure that you pick the right project. Now, once a transformation journey begins, you're going to get complaints. And the complaints are going to come from, 360 degrees. There's going to be issues from customers. There's going to be issues from the suits. There's going to be issues from testers and engineers, from HR, from the PMO, because everything changes. It changes for the good, but the environment has to change in order for Agile to work. What we like to say is Agile starts as a mindset shift. It's not changing tools. It's actually changing your mindset. So, even from team members, those that are actually doing the work of a project, their complaints might be along the lines of, we're spending all of our time in meetings. What's funny is that it's really less time. It just is more ritualistic, if you will. Those of us that have been doing Agile know about the daily stand-up that happens every day of every work day with every team member. Now, it's only 15 minutes, but you have the daily stand-up. The testers, these are folks that might say, well, how come, we have to have everything tested even though we know it's not going to ship until the end of the release. So maybe, you have a release that's been chucked up into, say, 8 or 9 iterations. The testers are like, why do I have to have everything tested in the first iteration? It's not even going to be shipped for 2 months. And so, and then the other part of it too is testers actually become part of the team. And, they're not just kind of grouped together testing the results from a bunch of different engineering teams. Star performers can kind of feel a little bit dislodged in things, because where in Waterfall, the focus is much more on individual performance. And somebody can become an expert and become quite siloed in what they do. When you make a shift to Agile, it's all about the team. Did the team deliver what it was supposed to deliver, as opposed to did you get your stuff done? And so it's actually the team performance that is focused on and is measured, and not the individuals within the team. In fact, those of us that have been involved in Agile enough, we know about one of the rituals, which is called a retrospective. And one of the main features of a retrospective is the focus is only on what went well and what did not go well, and there is no looking at individuals. There's no blaming, there's no individual criticisms. It's all about the outcome that the team experienced. Old school, those that have been doing Waterfall for a long time, they're going to feel like the level of documentation is not high enough. And they're going to feel like, wow, what if it fails? What if there's a problem? And they haven't yet seen the vision of how the short iterations lessen the need for documentation and improve the environment for actually getting things that work done. They won't see it that way, so they're going to complain. And even the customer can say, why do I have to spend so much time with the team? In Agile, the customer is involved from the beginning of the project to the end. In Waterfall, those of us that like got our PMPs and stuff, we know how we go through the effort of collecting requirements and creating the scope statement, and getting every key stakeholder to sign off on it on that level. And once that's done, the team then shifts into executing, and the involvement of the key stakeholders and the customer goes way down. Once the team starts creating the WBS, that's where the expertise of the team comes in. And the customer isn't going to stand there, and show up every day and watch how digging the, the dirt out of the way for the, the parking garage or the footings for the building. They're not going to be involved there. But in Agile, they're going to be involved on a daily basis when it comes to the software that's being developed. So they're going to say, why'd I have to spend so much time? So, this chart here just, gives you a bit idea of what kind of complaints you can expect. And those of us that are smart will say, okay, experience tells us that we can get these kinds of complaints. And so we figure out on the front end how we're going to address them. We make that part of our plan. Now, you can actually have some different levels of resistance. So this is different than complaints. This is the level of involvement that people may have. And we're going to use 4 quadrants to go with this. We're borrowing this from Mike Cohn, who's one of the thought leaders in Agile and Scrum specifically. So we thank him for this. And so one of the things we're going to consider is how folks resist the transformation to, or the transition to Agile. It can be passive. It can also be active. And we're also going to look at why they resist. It could be because they just like the way things are. They don't want to change. They don't see the need for it. And it could be people who actually dislike Agile or Scrum for whatever reason. A bad experience in the past, things they've heard from others. So in the bottom left quadrant there, we have what we call followers. And followers are those that are basically just going to go along to get along. They like the status quo. They figure Agile's just the fad, and they're not going to create any issues, but they're not really on board, right? They're just going to passively resist, expecting that eventually things will return to normal. Above that, in the top left, we've got the diehards. So these are those that are going to actively resist because they like the status quo. Um, they think Waterfall is the best. They do not see the value of Agile. Down at the bottom right, you have those that will resist passively because they don't like Agile or Scrum. Now, these are folks, though, that they're there, they're part of it, but they don't want to be. They didn't have a choice, so they're there. Then at the top right, you have the saboteurs. So these are those that don't like Agile and are going to actively resist. They don't want it. They're going to actually try and create failure so that things can revert back to Waterfall. Now, there are specific things that we can do to manage the expectations and the results when it comes to these four kinds of resistors. When it comes to followers, one of the best things you can do is involve them in the process. So basically what you want to do is you want to convert them to Agile so that they actually see that, oh, you know what, this actually is better than Waterfall. And so you'll involve them, you'll praise them for their correct behavior, and likely those will be your easiest converts. Your next easiest converts are going to be those that resist passively because they don't like Scrum. And so with these folks, you want to engage with them. You want to give them data. You want to make sure that they're heard. And then, hopefully they'll begin to see the benefits of Agile and say, okay, I guess I kind of like Agile or I like Scrum. The diehards, these are folks where you probably have to create in their own minds, in their own reality, a dissatisfaction with the status quo. That's why some of the studies like that Standish group study that we looked at can be helpful. Say, yeah, we're getting stuff done. Waterfall is structured, it works. I know you're comfortable with it, but look what happens. A 300% improvement in success. And then, you might discover that one of the reasons that diehards have an issue is because they have some fears about the transition. What's it going to do to their job? What's it going to do to them? And so you address their fears. The saboteurs, that's kind of a different group. You got to deal with these folks firmly. Because really, can you have team members that are actually interested in your project failing? And so these are the folks that have to say, look, I know you don't like Agile. I know you're resisting this, but the decision has been made. And either you get on board and you start, being involved here and want success, or you're going to have to go because we don't have room for you here. That might seem kind of harsh, but if you can't kind of de-escalate things and turn them into either a diehard or a skeptic, they're probably going to have to go. So that's overcoming resistance. And that kind of brings me to the conclusion of the formal presentation I have. And so with that, can I just bounce it back to you, Richard?
Certainly, Jeff. Thank you. Always a good talk. I love how much I learn on these. I wish I didn't have so much stuff in the back that I have to pay attention in addition to that. At this time, we are going to step into our question and answer period, and we have some great questions, some very specific ones from people from a guy from IBM and some other ones on the slides. Before I start those, I do need to start our polling, which we do at the end here while we do the question and answers up. We do not have a poll up. I don't know why they didn't load the poll. I don't know if if Mohammed's in the back. So while I send a chat note back there on the poll, let's go ahead and start the question and answer. And I usually answer the first question that comes up, and I see it just came in from, I don't know the name on there because it's their email. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we record these presentations. It does take up to 12 to 24 hours, depending if there's any problems with it, because they look at them and they make sure there's actually a recording there, nothing's wrong on the technical side. To get a recording, you go to simplylearn.com and click on the support and just say, hey, I was at this webinar, can I get a copy of that? And they'll send you the link so that you can view that recording and review it at your own time. Let me go ahead and go through here. We have from, I want to say Vamaral. My name is, oh, here we go. My name is Wagner, and I work for IBM, and we are currently going through a real company cultural change around here, which I think you might have already addressed, Jeff, towards the end there. You were talking about the struggles of all the different groups when you switch to Agile. So this is from earlier. Going through a real company cultural change around here and striving to transform into an Agile methodology-driven company. And there has been a lot of discussion around the co-location subject. Since we have been for many years a company well known for its work-at-home culture, I would love to hear your thoughts and insights regarding the subject. So he's asking about the co-location subject in concern to Agile framework. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I've run into myself. So for those of us well, let me contextualize the question a little bit this way. Agile was created for small projects, small teams that are co-located. And when you get into Agile and you start learning about the different techniques and the benefits, most of the discussion and literature and training that's out there focuses on the value of being co-located. And that's where the roots are. And there is value in being co-located. What is different now than was the case, 20 years ago is technology. And you can do Agile with virtual teams, but you have to leverage technology. Now, I had a real live situation. This was just a few years back, and I got a buddy who knows that I do project training, and he said, hey, I've got a project. I did a deal with a software development company. They quoted me $12,000 to put up a website, said it would take them maybe 90 days. He says it's been a year and a half, and not only is the $12,000 done, I've paid twice that, and I owe him some more money. He says, how about you quit training and you come and do? And here's the thing. My buddy's office was in Utah. The owner of the company that was doing the software development was also in the States, and all of the engineers were in Costa Rica. And so it was a virtual environment, and when I first got involved, they actually said that they were doing Agile, and when I kind of got into it, I thought, this really doesn't look very Agile to me. And so one of the first things I did is I actually worked with everybody, from the owner of the company to folks on, the customer side of things, as well as the engineers. And what we did is we implemented the use of some tools. One of the tools we used was Google Hangouts. And we didn't do this every day, but frequently I would just have everybody join a Google Hangout session, camera on, microphone on, and we all just worked. And I'd be in my office here in Utah, and I'd hear the engineers down in their rooms in Costa Rica talking about stuff. And then every now and then one of them would say, hey Jeff, I got a question on this user story I'm working on. Or I would say, hey Julio, can you tell me where you are on this particular user story? Might have a requirement issue on my end. And so, but I would also hear them take phone calls, and they would hear me talk to other folks. But it was like we were in the same room, so we leveraged technology. And then we used a software program called version 1 to create a virtual team room. And there are a lot out there. Version 1 ended up being probably more than we really needed, but there's Jira, there's Trello, there's others that we leveraged. And the idea then, to kind of circle back to your question, Wagner, is can you do co-location and be effective with Agile? And the answer is yes. And what you do is you still keep the small team, cross-functional team environment, but you then leverage technology to create a virtual team room and then that connectivity, kind of a virtual team space where everybody's connected throughout the day. If you have time zone issues, you might have to include a little bit more formal rituals, specific times to review things, maybe a little bit more documentation than you normally would. But usually that can be accomplished with the software that you're using, whether it's version 1 or Jira or something like that. So, Wagner, can I just double check? Did that answer the question for you well enough? Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I might, it just occurred to me that, based on some of the trainings I've done, sometimes it's very helpful to have either somebody internally that gets designated as sort of a coach or an evangelist for it, or even better sometimes is, a temporary, consultant arrangement where somebody comes in with some authority that can kind of disrupt things a little bit in order to get folks to kind of align with the program, if you will, and be less resistant to it. Okay, Richard, is there another question?
Excellent. Oh, we got lots of great questions coming in. Let's go a little bit more on general terms. And I know for myself, one of the things we all learn differently. So I always struggle with definitions. I get all the complex part of it, and then I just really can't remember what a word stands for. Um, so on that note, can you give a concise definition of Scrum along with who can be Scrum Master? What is the role of Scrum Master? Talk a little bit about the Scrum side of things.
I can. So Scrum is actually just a term that has to do with rugby. So it's not an acronym. So Scrum is just a made-up term for a type of agile project management. So it's a method. And in Scrum, there are 3 roles. One role is the Scrum Master, another role is the product owner, and the other role is the development team. The Scrum Master is an individual, the product owner is an individual, the development team is a group of cross-functional engineers, testers, whatever is needed, that is usually 6 plus or minus 3 inside. The best thinking on it right now is you never go larger than 9 on a development team. And together, those 3 roles create or are called the Scrum team. So you have the Scrum team, and then you have the development team. The product owner's job, responsibility, is the scope of the project. The product owner is the customer representative or the customer voice for the project when you're using Scrum, and is responsible for identifying the functional requirements for the project. The development team would address non-functional requirements that might have to do with security and scaling and other things like that that might be necessary that the product owner from the customer's point of view might not even really be aware of. Architecture things and things like that. Work that needs to be done that are foundational or predecessors to functional requirements being able to be completed. The product owner also determines the priority of things based on the customer's view of value. And the product owner has to make the tough decisions. If the development team says, in our next 2-week sprint, we can do 3 of these 5 user stories you want done. We can't do all 5. It's not possible. And the product owner might not like that, but the product owner ultimately has to make the hard decision as, okay, these are the 3 we're going to do. The development team's responsibility is to actually create the working software, which includes everything from design to coding to testing to demonstrating it. The Scrum Master's job is a servant leader position who facilitates the success of both the product owner and the development team. So a great Scrum Master is going to work with the product owner and deal with things like return on investment and payback period and sequencing and creating the greatest amount of value for the customer as quickly as possible. The Scrum Master also works with the team and is primarily responsible for removing impediments. The Scrum Master wants the engineers, the testers, whoever's on the development team to be working and working as fast and effectively as they can. And while it might seem a little bit goofy, if an overflowing trash can is impeding the work of the team, the Scrum Master empties the trash. Now, it's more practical than that in the real world. It might be making sure equipment is working, maybe getting software, maybe some training and things like that. But the idea is the Scrum Master facilitates their success by removing impediments. And then the Scrum Master is also the advocate, if you will, for Scrum and works with, trains, guides, coaches, mentors, both the product owner and the development team members in actually how to do Scrum. Did that get your question answered, or did I miss anything?
We actually had like three different people ask questions on the Scrum, so I don't know which one you're addressing because we had Ashish, we had Joe, we had not Joe, it was Ramesh, and yes, we got yes on one of those. I have another question that came in as far as both at the level of like setting up a company who is moving into Agile and for individual careers. What kind of certification or training would you suggest? So if I know we had somebody from IBM, but let's say you have a group in a company, you have like 30 people in the company and they have 4 projects going on, they're dividing it up. What kind of certification or path would be really good to get that company jumping in the right direction for using the Agile environment for their development? What kind of certifications?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to certifications, it's always a bit of a conundrum because they're all based on passing standardized tests, and most people who have ever taken standardized tests say, well, they're just stupid. They really don't measure or predict somebody's, capability and, viability in the real world. But the thing of it is that if you want to get ahead, you got to get certified. There's just no other way around it. It may not be ideal, but it's the best that we have. And so there are really 2 Agile certifications that I think ought to be at the top of someone's list. And, maybe you don't do both, but it wouldn't be bad to do both. So one is Agile Scrum Master. This is an eggs in certification. It's not US based, and its focus is on Scrum, but it does introduce you to some of the other methodologies, but it has 2 modules that are of particular interest. One is how to scale Agile. So how do you have multiple Agile teams working on a much larger project? And then another module in that training, and is covered by the certification, is enterprise, that's scaling, but the transformation, the actual journey. What do you do when it comes to actually having your organization go through a transition? So the advantages of that certification are that it focuses on, I shouldn't say focuses, but it has questions and testing on scaling Agile as well as Agile transformations. Another one worth considering is PMI ACP. PMI is US based, PMI is huge. ACP stands for Agile Certified Practitioner. So it's agnostic when it comes to Scrum or XP or others. Um, some of its value, where it is really good, is understanding and testing on Agile as an approach. Not much about transitions, not much about scaling, but more about how to do Agile, regardless of whether you're doing Scrum or XP or Crystal or Kanban or whatever. Some organizations weigh in on that. Some like PMI because they're so big. Exin has been around for a long time, but they're not as well known, at least not in the States, as PMI is. So I actually have both of those. So I'm speaking from my own personal experience. I like having both, actually. So maybe you pick one and then you do the other one, but those are the two that I think are worth looking at.
Excellent. Let's go. There's another question on from Ane. Ane? Hope I'm saying that right. He currently is working in manual testing with a mainframe. This is probably along the same lines as what you were just talking about. Which certification in Agile, if he was coming from mainframe, doing manual testing with mainframes, to move his career up into more project management and moving forward out of the mainframe? I'm guessing that's what he's asking. I hope I got that right in there. Right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I think my answer would basically be the same, either PMI, ACP, or ASM. There are some certifications out there offered by organizations that are just Scrum related, and there's value in those. The challenge that I see with those is that they're so narrowly focused, and some of the testing on those is pretty lightweight. Um, but if you really wanted to get into Agile and have some versatility and be able to offer broader value to employers, or just have it yourself, ACP or ASM would be what I would say.
Excellent, excellent. I should be looking into some of that myself from my background. Uh, if we can go back, because I have some more specific to the content, we have a question on the. Oh, Anne, you're very welcome. Thank you for noting that. We appreciate your question. We have a question on 9% fail in the pie chart of Agile. I guess it was like towards the first quarter of your talk. Let's see, we see 9% fail in the pie chart of Agile. What could be the reason for that fail? I guess we're looking
Well,
for reasons why
yeah,
Agile fails in a project.
there can be a number of reasons why an Agile project would fail, but usually it's because you're trying to do Agile and you're not really buying into it. So one of the things that I see common out there is people will say we're doing Agile and they're really not, and so they still are vexed by the issues of going over budget and going longer than they were, supposed to, based on some kind of, imposed budget or schedule. So in Agile, your budget and your schedule emerges throughout the course of the project. It happens early in the project, as the team starts, producing, and the velocity becomes known, and then it can become very accurate in predicting where it's going. Another problem, to not just actually fully implementing and doing Agile, is that the customer is not engaged properly. You cannot do Agile if the customer is not giving regular feedback. If a team decides to do sprints or iterations that go too long, 3 weeks or 4 weeks, heaven forbid you'd even do any longer than that, you're not getting the feedback from the customer that you need, and so the customer might be saying, I'm not accepting this, this isn't what I want, and that can be a failure. There are other reasons, it could be just money running out, some of the more practical things, the customer actually just saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Trying to think things that I've run into, sponsorship ends, the team doesn't have the skills that it needs. But those kinds of things get addressed. It's usually that Agile isn't really being done the way it should be.
Excellent. And just a quick note, I have like one more question I think we're going to take before we close the session. If you have some questions that come up after this session, or you want to know more about Simplilearn and their Get Certified program to get you certified in the different Agile aspects and different certifications available, you can definitely visit simplylearn.com. We have usually a live support right there that comes up, and then you can also click on the community, and there's an open forum in there where you can also ask additional questions, and our experts do go in there and look at those questions regularly. So you have both a community forum, so it is, like I said, open to anybody to answer, and the experts coming in who do know their business as far as the different certifications and options that are available. Let me go ahead and let's see. Yeah, here we go. Can you speak to the process of converting high-level business requirements into epics and ultimately stories? That's from Joe. Thank you, Joe. So processes converting high-level business requirements into epics and ultimately stories. And you might want to talk about exactly what an epic is and a story is.
Yeah, so what you're really talking about is what we cover in some of our trainings that we call the planning onion, which you start at the broadest level, which is strategic, and then you get down to portfolios, and then to products, and then to releases, and then down to sprints. So epics are groups of user stories that are grouped together to simplify planning. But epics eventually are going to have to be disaggregated into smaller user stories that can be completed in single sprints. So there's sort of a hierarchy. So if you start with a product road map that is divided into maybe 3 or 4 different versions or incarnations, you would use releases to support the product roadmap. So like release 1 might be version 1. Release 2 might result in version 2, for example. Releases are supported by actual sprints or iterations. So a release might be disaggregated or broken down into 15 or 20 sprints, when at the end of those 20 sprints the release is ready and version 1 can be taken live. And then each sprint is broken down into tasks and are run usually in durations of 2 to 4 weeks. So did that help?
Yes, Joe came back. I don't know if you can see that on your screen.
Okay,
thank
good.
you, Joe, for that question. It was a great question in breaking that down. And then we have one last question we'll sneak in here. See about CSM. I'm not even sure what CSM, but I'm not a project lead manager. I do other work on what CSM is and what that is, and like what the part that plays in the industry. Are you familiar with CSM?
I am. That stands for Certified Scrum Master. It is a certification offered by, I believe it's the Scrum Alliance. And it's sort of a quick training where you get into Scrum deeply and then take a test right after. It's an open book test. It's popular because it's inexpensive and it's quick, and if you're breathing, you can probably pass the test. The problem is that it's pretty lightweight, and I don't want to cast aspersions there, but I know that it's pretty easy to get a CSM, and it doesn't get deeply into Agile as a family of methods like other certifications do. So it's very narrowly focused and relatively lightweight. So is there value in it? Sure, there's value in it. A good place to start if you're going to dabble, or your company requires it. Better place to go would be like ASM, Agile Scrum Master, because it's broader. It's a bit harder of a test, but if the test is harder, then it's more meaningful in the world.
Mm, excellent. Excellent. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to bring the session to a close. Thank you, Joe, for the comment on the, I guess, the onion acronym. You guys were talking earlier with Joe. So we're going to go ahead and bring this to a close because we have gone over by a little bit here, which is fine. And I wanted to thank everybody for being here today. We definitely appreciate your taking the time out of your day to come listen to our webinars. Again, simplylearn.com or hashtag SL webinars. If you have a note or you want to share something you learned in the webinar today on your social media. And I want to thank you, Jeff, for being here. Thank you for taking your time out today to share your knowledge. And I certainly learned a few things today, and I wasn't even paying close attention because, like I said, I have other things I do. Um,
Glad to have been here. Fun stuff. And team, can I just say good luck to all of you? I wish you the best.
Excellent. And happy learning to everybody, and we look forward to seeing some of you in our classrooms.